Welcome back to Big Riff Energy. It's episode 66. Today is Tuesday, June 4th. Almost halfway through the year, y'all. I'm going to be having this best albums of the year so far list coming up soon. But first, today let's talk about perfect albums. I'm going to go ahead and dive into the list. And as I go, maybe I can qualify what I mean by a perfect album. But this first one will give you a good idea. Very obvious choice, Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. Not only is this perfect musically, look at that cover art. One of the most, it's perfect. Everything about this is perfect. Widely considered one of the greatest albums ever made. The legendary Hypnosis design firm in the UK is responsible for this packaging and the album art, and the band, when they saw the cover, just all unanimously agreed that that was it. Clearly. What do I mean by perfect? I don't mean that it's actually perfect, that the performances are flawless, that there's no human inconsistency, that there's no strangeness or weird, beautiful, flawed aspects to the album. I guess I should say perfect to me means there's not a song that you are even remotely tempted to skip. And I sort of tightened up my constraints for this list even further, and I would venture to say these are albums where there's not a second on the album that isn't completely necessary. So last video I did was best debut albums, and it killed me to not include this band, Lynyrd Skynyrd. That last list was metal albums. Clearly they're not a metal band. But for this, I'm going to go with the second album, Second Helping. I love every Skynyrd album pre-Plane Crash. And a lot of days, Give Me Back My Bullets is my favorite. But, you know, we're talking about perfect here. We're talking about bulletproof. We're talking about not a second where it lulls, not a second where you're drifting off board, not a second where you're wondering why they're playing that part. And as much as I love Give Me Back My Bullets, Same Old Blues and Double Trouble are a little bit too similar, and I think it hurts that they're back to back. So, I mentioned on the last video that some of my favorite albums I don't consider perfect. Black Sabbath Sabotage, I don't consider perfect. You actually won't see Sabbath on this list, believe it or not. I think Master of Reality is probably the closest thing they got to a perfect album, but still didn't quite make the cut. But that's Lynyrd Skynyrd's Second Helping. AC/DC, Power Age. I've heard this pronounced Power Age, but I think it's like Powerage, like amperage, you know. This is the album that made me understand the brilliance of AC/DC. It's perfect. There's not a second of it that doesn't completely kick ass. It's just, if you're going to study how to make rock and roll or hard rock, this is this is as good as it gets, man. AC/DC, Powerage. This next album is what gave me the idea to do this list, because I started thinking about, how many albums could I really say are like perfect and bulletproof? This is the one right here, Boston. If I had to pick one album as a representative for peak FM rock radio, AOR, the stuff that was syndicated on classic rock radio when I was growing up, Boston. Some of the best guitar harmonies ever recorded, some of the best vocal melodies and vocal harmonies ever recorded, some of the coolest riffs and solos, and literally perfect songwriting, and just not a second that lulls at all. This list is getting redundant. I've already explained what perfect is, so next up, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Damn the Torpedoes. Insane that one record could have this many perfect hit songs on it. The second to last song, which is usually where you bury your weakest track, is What Are You Doing in My Life? So, I mean, the last song is Louisiana Rain. It's like a damn Hank Williams song. Insane. Tom Petty, Damn the Torpedoes. I mentioned this one on the last video, Dio, Holy Diver. Duh. I didn't limit this list to metal because I just don't think that there's enough metal records that don't have a second that seems like kind of unnecessary, or like there just weren't enough metal records to qualify. But Dio, Holy Diver is one of them. Slayer, Rain and Blood is one of them from the same year. 86 has got to be the best year ever for metal. This is just, you want to talk about cutting the fat, man. Ditch the reverb, ditch the wannabe weird Merciful Fate, way too ambitious song structures, and just try to kill everybody on Earth. Rain and Blood. This remains the standard for trying to make an album like that, with zero fat, zero filler, brutal, aggressive, playing your guts out, playing so fast that the four guys are so slightly off with each other that it's almost becoming avant-garde. Yeah, Rain and Blood is a standard still today. Next up, Cro-Mag's Age of Quarrel. This is my favorite hardcore record ever made. I don't care if it's cliche. I know about more underground stuff. I'm sure you do too. Who cares? None of that more underground stuff is better and more perfect than this from start to finish. Legitimately flawless. If I was going to show somebody what hardcore is all about, it would be Cro-Mag's Age of Quarrel. Riffs. You can play hardcore and have riffs and thoughtful lyrics. Alice in Chains, Dirt. I don't even think I need to say anything about that. I will say, I Feel So Alone, Gonna End Up a Pile of Them Bones is one of my... Oh my God. I Feel So Alone, Gonna End Up a Pile of Them Bones. How did he come up with that? All right. Weezer, Blue Album. This for you, Glenn Benton. For all the diehard metal folks watching this, go queue up your favorite metal record. Go pull out the vinyl or the CD or queue it up on your streaming service of choice. Listen to a couple of songs. Then put on Weezer Blue Album and compare the guitar tone. And I will bet you everything I own that the guitar tone on the Weezer Blue Album is way more crushing and heavy and intense than the guitar tone on your favorite metal record. It's insane. It might be the best guitar tone ever recorded. If you played Slayer, Rain and Blood with the Weezer Blue Album guitar tone, it would just be out of control. Yeah, and I was super young. This has like the first music video I remember seeing, the Happy Days thing. So it got in there, and I think the first two Weezer albums are just perfect. But I mean, the Blue Album is like, yeah, that's another duh. Down, Nola, talked about this one last week. Whatever, I won't say any more about that. It's perfect. Here we go. Best melodic death metal record ever made. In Flames, Jester Race. Every single song, if it was any other band, it would be the best song they ever wrote. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them. 10 of them. You can pick one at random, and it would be the best song that any other melodic death metal band ever wrote. Jester Race. Queens of the Stone Age, Songs for the Deaf. A bit of a concept album. You know, it's funny, this has like weird interludes and narration sections and all kinds of stuff, but to me, it sort of reminds me of Dark Side of the Moon, in the sense that like even the parts where there's no music going on, they seem crucial to solidifying the experience, you know. So not a wasted second on this album, and really just sort of qualifies as a supergroup. Really a life changer for me and so many others. Songs for the Deaf. Now we're going to go underground a little bit. U.S. Christmas from North Carolina. This album is called Eat the Low Dogs. There's nothing like this. This came out on Neurot. I saw these guys at the very first Scion Rock Fest in Atlanta and was fully unprepared for what I experienced. I would say this is like the darkest, scariest, most psychedelic aspects of Hawkwind, the darkest, most terrifying, apocalyptic angriest aspects of Neil Young. Maybe the most introspective, creepy, spooky elements of Neurosis. With this like Cormac McCarthy fire and brimstone, terrifying, Deliverance type aspect to it. There's nothing like it in the world. It's a perfect album. You could really look at it as one long song, terrifying journey through the darkest corners of Appalachia, via twanged out psychedelic, psychopath music. Yeah. US Christmas, or also known as USX. Eat the Low Dogs. Check that one out. This one from Ohio, Struck by Lightning. I see now that this was licensed from my buddy Drew at Translation Loss. Hey, Drew. Yeah, this is insane. I would say this is for fans of Nails. If this came out today, y'all would lose your goddamn minds. I think that it was a weird timing thing. Not a lot of bands were doing this kind of stuff, but it is as pissed off and hateful and aggressive and evil as humanly possible from the second it starts to the second it ends. It's from that Rain and Blood kind of school of thought of just like, the most we're going to give these people as far as dynamics is like, I don't know, bring it down to a mid-tempo violent beating rather than like a warp speed violent beating. It is really, really heavy and angry and and hateful, and I love it so much. If you like Nails, Black Breath, HM2 stuff, crust punk, Discharge, black metal, like if you like music that makes you want to kill everybody, this is one of the best records ever made for that. Struck by Lightning. The record is called True Predation. Shout out to like maybe the best band ever from Ohio. And going to Kentucky, Tyler Childers, Purgatory, country album, obviously. I might really upset some purists with this. If you care about country at all, I don't know. But I think this might be the best country album ever made. I know that's borderline blasphemous, as it's a genre that's arguably been around for like 100 years. But I've heard a lot of it. I love a lot of it. Waylon's got some pretty good records. He has a couple, like what I would say are borderline perfect records, Dreamin' My Dreams and Honky Tonk Heroes. Sturgill came close with Metamodern Sounds. I think of all the fantastic country albums that have been released in the last 100 years, but for my money, Tyler Childers' Purgatory is the best. Another thing I consider with this list is like, within the wheelhouse that you're operating, how much variety are you giving us? So there's the drinking, getting as fucked up as possible songs. There's the being in love songs. There's the wanting to kill yourself songs. There's the being on the road songs. He even took it out to do like psychedelic, introspective, sort of like the newer school of country, where it seems like in the 70s, everybody was about cocaine and speed. And now they're kind of about psychedelics and that sort of stuff. It's just, he captured everything that's great about 100 years of country music tradition, paid tribute to that, and then did his own thing and sort of brought it into the present. And to me, that's what it's all about. So there's the list. I don't even know how many that was, but there was a couple that I strongly considered that came close. You know, I think I mentioned Master of Reality. But if there is a flawless, perfect, bulletproof, no skip album that I missed, go ahead and comment. And I'm going to do album of discussion before fan questions. You know, it sucks to keep having to come on here and eulogize people and talk about people that have died. I was thinking about it. I was like, God, what's up with that? And I guess the cool thing is, it's good to care about stuff. I care about a lot of stuff. Or maybe that's not accurate. Maybe I don't care about a lot of stuff, but I care a lot about the stuff I care about. And I guess another way to look at it is I've been fortunate enough to make some cool friends and meet some fellow travelers out there, whatever you want to call it. But I want to talk about Bryan Spinks from Samothrace. Criminally underrated band. And yeah, go check out 20 Bucks Spin's Instagram post on it. Dave made a very powerful, emotionally meaningful, but also very informative, like historically. Instagram post on Spinks. 2008, Samothrace recorded and released their first album on 20 Bucks Spin. It's called Life's Trade. First of all, if you haven't heard them, I would say that it's for fans of Asunder, Graves at Sea, Buried at Sea for that matter. Sanford Parker recorded the first Samothrace record. Same year that I recorded with Sanford the first time. 20 Bucks Spin put that out, 2008, like I said. Yeah, it's, Mournful Congregation. I think Samothrace was very influential to early pallbearer. I don't think that. I know that. They have said as much. I know that Samothrace was very influential to early Spirit Adrift. And when I revisited their two albums recently, I was kind of shocked at how much Spinks' writing had an impact on mine. It's very much in the wheelhouse of, what you would expect from Funeral Doom and that sort of thing. The vocals stand out. The vocals are more of like a roar, anguished, just roar, very emotional. It's not super guttural. It's not really like a black metal thing. It's more of just like a person in a lot of pain. And the lead guitar stands out a lot. Spinks is drawing, he's an Oklahoma boy, technically, I guess. They relocated at some point from Lawrence, Kansas to Seattle. When we met them back in 2008 or so, they were in Lawrence. My old band played with them in Fayetteville, Arkansas. That's how we were introduced to these folks. Dylan Desmond from Bell Witch. Most of you probably know him from Bell Witch. He was playing bass at the time. But yeah, Spinks was an Oklahoma boy, so he was drawing, I think, from all the stuff that I grew up with, if I had to guess. Talked about it a lot, driving around listening to FM rock radio, so Skinner in Boston and stuff like that. And also country and probably Neil Young and just sort of the culture of growing up in the South. So for a Funeral Doom band, what I was really struck by revisiting their material is just like how soulful and bluesy and cool his lead guitar playing is. His solos they got more in common with like Muddy Waters or Billy Gibbons than they would with Worm or Mournful Congregation or something like that. And I think that helped Samothrace really stand out amongst Funeral Doom bands. They recorded another album called Reverence to Stone, which came out in 2012. And that's just two long-ass songs, A-side and B-side. And I like that album even more, honestly. It's, I was just kind of going down the rabbit hole the other day, as I do when these things happen, and saw that my old friend Kim Kelly had reviewed Reverence to Stone for Pitchfork, gave it an 8.2. Stunning review for a stunning album, really well written. Kim's a great writer. Yeah, it was just taking me back, man. If you were, out in the trenches in that circuit, so let's say 2007 to 2010, 11, 12, you probably came across Samothrace. You probably came across Bryan Spinks. He was a really nice guy. Every time I hung out with him, we were going really, really hard. So my memories of him are fuzzy, unfortunately. But my feeling of him is that I loved the guy, and I think so many people felt that way. He was just he radiated love and sensitivity and kindness and riffs, big riff energy, man. I remember the last time I hung out with Joe Joe Axler, who played drums on Reverence to Stone. We were in Seattle kind of spending the day with him, and he was giving us a rundown of how they recorded it and said they tracked it in like one take. You know, the A side is like one take all the way through, the B side's one take all the way through. And very few bands still do that kind of thing. And there is a powerful energy coming off of that second Samothrace album, Reverence to Stone. So check it out, man. More people should know about the talents and creativity and riffs of Bryan Spinks. And I was very sad to hear that we lost another good guy. So yeah, Samothrace, Life's Trade 2008 and Reverence to Stone 2012, both were put out on $20 spin. And that's it, man. Check it out. I know the listeners of this show will like it, and spread the word. Okay, I'm going to get to some questions. Chris, just a somewhat quick story of good vibes and big riff energy. I'm a big Power Trip fan. When Riley passed, I was really bummed as it was during COVID, and at the time they were at top of my list of bands to see when lockdown let up. Alas, it was not to be. Speed up to the near present a few episodes back when you did the Power Trip Fugitive episode. That's how I found out Fugitive had formed. Of course, I was blown away, bought their EP, 45, and shirt. Now to back up, the start of the year had been rough, miserable at a good paying job, life stress, blah, blah, blah. You know how it goes. I do. The best paying job I ever had was the most miserable I've ever been. Yeah, I know exactly how it goes. Anyway, I live in the Midwest, Cleveland, Ohio. The land. I love the brewery Three Floyds. Yeah, great indie brewery in Munster, Indiana. Has a metal theme to a lot of their beers and marketing. Their big beer is Dark Lord, a 15% Russian Imperial Stout. It sells out every year on Dark Lord Day, which is a beer and metal festival I've been wanting to go for years. Dude, if it was pre-2015, they wouldn't have any of that shit left if I was at the Dark Lord Day. Well, the lineup came out for this year. It was High on Fire, Abath, 1349, Spirit World, Sibris, a local Chicago band, and of course Fugitive, which was a selling point on me finally going. Needless to say, the day was amazing. It was a well-run, fun event. Every band was incredible. Just 2 weeks earlier, I'd landed a new job, put in my 2 weeks notice. With new beginnings, great music, and good beers, spirits were high, not adrift. Couldn't help myself. God. Fugitive was the highlight for me. That raw thrash energy, fucking brilliant. Headbang like my life depended on it. So man, the point is, crossing paths with you led to a high point in my music life. For that, I say thank you and cheers. Cheers, man. I love these kind of emails. It never gets old. Yeah, I need to hit up Blake from Fugitive and Power Trip to come on here. I've been meaning to for a minute. I'm just kind of getting behind. But I'm going to do that because people have been asking. I think of modern dudes, he's one of the best at writing riffs and arranging songs. Every time we run into each other, like we instantly just start talking about writing songs. It's sick, no matter where we are. So I'm going to reach out to him and see if we can set up a conversation for the people who have been asking. Cheers, man. I'm glad I could help you discover that. And I'm glad that you are not taking shit from that high-paying job anymore. Tiago from Brazil. First of all, sorry it took me a long while, but I've been really flattered. You read my email about Solitude Eternus on the show. Thank you very much. I wasn't expecting that, or I would have been more to the point in my writing. Nowhere. I kind of like just skip stuff sometimes, man. I'm sorry. I've been catching up with the show lately and love the interview with Nocturno Culto and especially Max Cavalera. It's weird how we in Brazil used to have mixed feelings about him, a hero up to the Sepultura split, when he became some kind of villain. Basically, the entire Brazilian metal community blamed him for the split. Then going almost full new metal with Soulfly, first albums didn't help much. It seemed somehow back then Max wanted to keep up with trendy music, but in the last 10 to 15 years, those feelings died down as he became that genuine, excited metalhead from back in the day. And he's been doing very good albums. Love the first Go Ahead and Die and the last two Cavalera albums. And those re-recordings are unexpectedly great. Now looking forward to Schizophrenia, which is my favorite Sepultura album. Let's see how it turns out. One more time, thank you for reading the mail on the show. Love the approach you have for interviews. Yeah, the thing with Max, man, a couple things come to mind. The guy is genuinely just excited about music. So at times, I think there are people who are being pushed or maybe, pushed by the outside or pushed internally to sort of stay relevant to what's going on. I don't really think that's the case with him. I think he just listens to new music as it's coming out, and he's familiar with new music and he gets excited about it. And really, Chaos AD, I'll even say Arise has moments on it that I would consider precursors to nu metal, because it's a fine line. I talked about this with Outer Heaven, writing breakdowns in low tunings. I don't think Arise is in low tuning, but like the dead embryonic cells breakdown, if you just change that a little bit, it would almost be nu metal. So to me, it doesn't seem disingenuous that Max went down that path. I think that's like the kind of music that he was into, for sure. Another thing that comes to mind, I look at fighters, like MMA fighters or boxers or athletes or whatever. There's this arc to their life, and I think they're appreciated right at the beginning when they're doing something great. And then there's a mid period where maybe things get weird, or they're experimenting, or they're doing different stuff, and there's a lull. But here's what a lifer is, man. Whether we're talking about, I don't know, novelists, athletes, actors, whatever. Like, look at Mickey Rourke. Here's an example where when you stay in the game and you stay true to the game, in this case, it would be metal, big riff energy. If you stay in it for decades, people are going to respect you no matter what. And they should. They should. So it's interesting to see that happen with people. The first thing that comes to mind for me is MMA fighters, because I'm a fan of that. They might not be appreciated while they're in their prime. And let's take like Nick Diaz, who's coming, my phone blew up when when old ass Nick Diaz was announced to come back and fight, I guess in a few months or something. But Nick and Nate Diaz were not loved by MMA fans for a long time. And then I think people finally understood, like, oh, these guys are lifers. These guys are not like athletes. They're not competitors. They're not whatever. They are those things. But more importantly, they're fighters, and that applies to guys like Max Cavalera or Lemmy or Kirk from Crowbar or Wino. It's like, these guys are metal lifers, and that's it. And when you've been in something and you've dedicated your whole life to something for decades, it's cool to see the general consensus come around to like, okay, this is a legend. This is a legend. And that status is earned, and it's not earned in 5 years, and it's not earned in 10 years. I'm not even sure it's earned in 20 years. That legend status. And Max is a legend, period. Ted is too, man. All these guys. And it's been an honor to talk to a couple of these dudes that are legitimate living legends. And I got more lined up. If you have guest ideas, hit me, bigriffenergy@gmail.com. All right, last question for this episode. Tony, not so much a question. This is Tony from Fast and Bulbous. They've been doing some reviews of new stuff coming out, and then he's telling me about some stuff that's coming up that he's excited about. So part of this, a lot of people have been asking me about the new Pallbearer album. And, you know, I've briefly sort of mentioned that I checked it out. It's one of those albums that you really have to sit down and listen to. And I've just kind of been torn in a million directions lately. And the stuff I've been listening to is more like, I don't know. I've been going back to Exodus, Bonded by Blood a lot. Every time I try to listen to something, I put Exodus, Bonded by Blood on. I'm like doing physical stuff all day, so I need that. You know, I listen to Nile. I listen to the new Zompantli. Probably going to be talking about that. So every time I was trying to listen to the new Pallbearer, I just knew in myself that I wasn't really in a situation that would be ideal for listening to an album that clearly requires a lot of patience and a lot of stillness and not necessarily attention, but just being present, you know. But then the other day, you know, I'm sitting there, I'm reading this book at the recommendation of a buddy of mine, The 5 Invitations. And what's it? Discovering what death can teach us about living fully. I have been particularly inundated in the looming specter of death lately, but you know what? So are you. We're all just in different stages of it, right? But if you're listening to this, guess what? You're dying right now. The second you were born, you started dying, you know? And that's what this book is about. It's kind of like how life and death is one thing that's together, and that death is sort of what makes life meaningful. So as I'm reading this, I'm like, you know what would pair well with this is a new Pallbearer album. So I put it on, what's it called? Mind Burns Alive. And I know there will come a period in my life where I'm more in a position to where that's like the exact thing that I want to listen to. Even though I'm not in that position currently in life, it's a great album. It's great. And it's Pallbearer. I feel like maybe it's been sort of somewhat divisive, but I remember every album they put out after their second album was divisive. I remember when Heartless came out, incredibly divisive. And a lot of those people that were hating on it then seem to consider it their best album now. I still think in a lot of ways that could be their best album. You know, but the new album to me is Pallbearer. It's not even that big of a stretch from anything they've done in the past. Yeah, I mean, it's like all the same shit they've always been good at and all the same stuff that they've been doing. It's just like different sounds, I guess. Maybe the approach is a little more, I don't know, like traditional songwriting, maybe? I don't even know if that's accurate. It's going to take me a while to really dissect exactly how I feel about it, but it's clearly objectively awesome. And I think the fact that with the last album, they went like pretty super heavy, like they leaned into, if Pallbearer's usual music is on like a spectrum, and on one side it's like Ashes from the second album. I think it's from the second album. You know, really, really subdued and quiet and pensive. If that's one end of the spectrum, and the other end of the spectrum is like super heavy, borderline like drop A breakdown type stuff, you know, like the absolute heaviest stuff that they've done. Like the opening or second song on Heartless, I forget what it's called, but it's super heavy, right? The last album really leaned into that. Forgotten Days, just like easily the heaviest end of the Pallbearer spectrum. So it makes sense to me that with a new album, they would want to explore the other end of that spectrum. But if you listen to the guitar parts and the lyrics and the vocals and the song structures, I mean, to me, it's a very obvious Pallbearer album. It's not that much different than what they've always been doing. And it's definitely like a standout in the catalog. I know that much. So I'm going to give it some more time. I'm going to try to get those guys out here. think I mentioned it before. They're playing Austin and Houston, so I'm gonna see who all I can get to come out here and possibly hop on this podcast, and hopefully we can talk about it a little bit more. Tony also mentioned High Desert Queen from Texas is putting out an album. Great band, really like them. Their guitarist Rusty is killer, and actually the way that I met Jeff Henson, who recorded parts of the last Spirit Adrift album, was I went out to his studio and High Desert Queen was recording. I actually played a guest guitar solo on their, I guess, first album. And oddly enough, these dudes use the same Euro PR agency as Dark Throne. So I've been in touch with their guy. I guess I'm on his like mailing list or whatever. So yeah, I might talk to somebody from High Desert Queen. New Resin coming out. Crib Sermon. Yeah, I saw yesterday that my vinyl copy of the new Crib Sermon has shipped. So I'll definitely be talking about that. And then oddly enough, I was talking to Steve from Crib Sermon, the guitar player, 2 days ago. We were talking shop about some gear and technical stuff. And I realized, man, I should ask him to come on the podcast. They got an album coming out in like 2 weeks. So I'm going to hit him up as well and hopefully get him on here. If I had to pick a favorite current metal guitarist, it would probably be Steve from Crib Sermon. There's a few guys that come to mind. Brandon Ellis from Black Dahlia comes to mind. Sonny from Necrot comes to mind. Arthur. But God, Steve is really, really good. So I'm going to see if he wants to come on here. And I'll probably be covering that record soon enough. What else, man? That's it. Yeah. Stay up. Stay busy, like I said. And I know I am. I'll see you next week. Cheers.
Riff.